Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yisraelite speaking just east of Jerusalem. Today is the 24th day of the month of ER 5782. It's May 25th, 2022. This coming Shabbat here in Israel, we begin the book of Numbers, parashat Bamidbar. Bamidbar literally means in the wilderness, and that's the Hebrew name of the parsha and of the entire book, Sefer of Numbers. It's called Numbers in English because it begins with a census of all the tribes of Israel. But in Hebrew, it's called Bamidbar, in the wilderness, and really that is a more accurate, comprehensive title because, as we all know, the book of Numbers is full of stories of Israel's adventures, ups and downs, Israel's celebrations, victories, and also disasters and catastrophes in the wilderness. It takes us from the beginning of the second year in the wilderness to the end of the 40th year in the wilderness. Most of it is concerned with that crucial second year, because at the end of the first year, of course, was the establishment of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which we've talked about it, and that story has been repeated many times, each time with a different purpose throughout the books of Exodus and Leviticus, each time focusing on some other aspect of the inauguration of that first day of the beginning of the service in the tabernacle, the Mishkan. And again, we're going to be reprising that opening celebration in the book of Numbers. And by the conclusion of the book of Numbers, Israel is this time, for the second time, going to be ready to enter into the land of Israel. And for the second time, and the real times, of course, here's a spoiler alert. We're going to discover that, of course, the first time Israel was ready to enter the land was at the conclusion of that first year, right after the inauguration of the tabernacle. Once that was done, Hashem was ready to bring Israel in, and it was only the, of course, sin debacle, whatever you want to call it, of the spies, which we'll read about in a few weeks, that delayed the entry for 39 long years. Anyway, today, speaking of 39, today is the 39 days, which are 5 weeks and 4 days of the Omer. And for those who follow the Sephardic configuration of each of the days of the 49 days of the Omer, today's configuration is Netzach within Yesod, Netzach b'Yesod. And Netzach, of course, represents victory, also eternity. The word means both in Hebrew. And Yesod literally means foundation. And it also refers to righteousness, or to tzaddik, the righteous one, because the righteous are the foundation of the world, we say, because righteousness is what keeps us going. And if there were no righteous men in the world, men or women, in the world would have no existence. It wouldn't continue. So today, Netzach b'Yesod. This coming Motzei Shabbat, this coming Saturday night, Sunday, is Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day here in Israel. And Jerusalem Day actually falls on Shabbat this year, but it's nidche, it's pushed off till Motzei Shabbat, Saturday night, Sunday, so that we can celebrate it properly. And it's going to be a big one, and it's going to be very interesting and exciting. There have been campaigns to encourage as many people as possible to come up to the Temple Mount on Yom Yerushalayim, and hopefully there will be thousands on Yom Yerushalayim on the Temple Mount, and hopefully the government and the police won't back out, chicken out, because of what perceived threats by Hamas or whoever else, Palestinian who decides that they are uncomfortable with Jewish presence on the Temple Mount. And also the government gave the go-ahead, the green light for the flag march, the flag dance / march, typical Jerusalem Day celebration, which takes place in Jerusalem. Thousands of people, many youths, get together with Israeli flags, and they have a march route. And that route, the traditional route, goes through the Damascus gate of the Old City right up to the Western Wall in the Old City. And last year there were violent confrontations with Arabs. And of course, this year, Hamas and everybody else is threatening Israel with all sorts of violence if this happens. And so far, the government has given the green light, but they always reserve the right at the last minute to cancel it, which they may do if they get weak in the knees. And this government has not been particularly strong, let's say, vis-a-vis the Palestinians. Of course, this government is, as I said last week, right now just completely dependent on the support of not only the Muslim Brotherhood list, Ram, which is in the government, but also on another Arab list called the Joint List, which is even more horrific than Ram, complete and outspoken supporters of terror. And this current government, led by Naftali Bennett, whose last campaign slogan was, he'll make, if he's prime minister or whatever government he's in, it will be 10 degrees further to the right from the Netanyahu-led governments. And of course, he has broke every promise and right now is leading a government that no longer has a majority in the Knesset. They're stumbling, they're tottering, they'll probably be out within weeks. But they'll drag it on as long as they can for their own personal political survival at the expense of the nation of Israel. And so who knows what's going to be. But Jerusalem Day is a huge day in the 4,000-year history of the Jewish people, because it's the day that in the Six-Day War in 1967, and I think it was on June 7th or 8th, the day of that war, but of course we go by the Hebrew date here in Israel, so that moves around vis-a-vis the Gregorian date. That was a day that the Israeli Defense Forces entered into the Old City, captured this Temple Mount, captured the Old City from the Jordanians, liberated, I should say. And of course, Rabbi Yisrael Ariel, the founder and head of the Temple Institute, was one of those paratroopers who liberated the Temple Mount. He has a fascinating story, and we've recorded it on video a number of years ago. We'll be playing that again, of course, on Jerusalem Day, Yom Yerushalayim. And it's big, the Temple Mount. I've been talking about it a lot on the radio show lately. I've been posting a lot of articles, and as I've said in past weeks, I don't post every article because I don't want to bore people if not everybody's interested in all this information. And I try to post the essential articles, but a lot is happening. Of course, Jordan, King of Jordan, Abdullah, is making a full frontal attempt to wrest any Israeli presence or control from the Temple Mount. He was recently in the United States and was talking to President Biden about how he doesn't want any Jewish presence, no Jewish prayer, nothing on the Temple Mount. This is our peace partner. This is the man who we divert millions of gallons of water to each year so that his country will have water to drink. This is the man whose survival depends on the Israeli security blanket, which Israel affords them. And he gets many other benefits left, right, and center from Israel. And he is becoming more and more hostile to Israel and he and his government. And again, the Bennett-led Israeli government wanted to repair relations with Jordan because it was very tense between Netanyahu and Abdullah. And so they were muchi-puchi. Is that an expression in English? I don't know. We say it here in Israel. Muchi-puchi. They were, hugs and kisses and cuddles with Abdullah, and boasting on how they've repaired the relations by giving more and more to Abdullah. We never get anything back in return except a couple of photo ops. And this is what they're getting in return now: complete hostility and intransigence. And my prediction is that Abdullah, by trying to cuddle up to his radical friends in his country and government, is going to eventually maneuver himself right out of power. because you cannot, and I'm telling this to the Israeli government as well, you cannot, um, he who sleeps with dogs wakes up with fleas. If you're going to sleep with Islamic fundamentalist, supremacist, racist, then you're going to lose in the end. There's no way you can gain from such a collaboration. So anyway, the other big news, and it's the second time in half a year, I think, that a young Israeli, appealed decision of the police on the Temple Mount to banish him from the mount for some time because he prayed. He said the Shema, the most prime, most famous Israeli statement, Jewish statement, I should say, Jewish statement of faith. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God. Hashem is one. This is what we say when a child is and a boy in his Brit Milah, his circumcision. We say this. We say it every day, morning and night, before we go to sleep. We say it if we are cognizant. We say it just before our death. It is the Jewish statement, and this young man said it out loud in the Temple Mount, and the police took him off and banished him. So he appealed in court, and the judge said, "There's absolutely nothing wrong with this." Saying the Shema, even bowing down, the judge said, "This is Jewish. This is a form of Jewish prayer, and it's allowed." And the police, they're well, I'm losing my words here. Their official complaint was that it caused a disturbance of the peace. And the judge said, "There's no disturbance of the peace. The only people who are disturbed with it were the police." And then the police said, "But then he didn't cooperate with us." And of course he didn't cooperate with you. He wanted to say the Shema. He was exercising his rights at the expense of no one. So the police, do something that's against the law. And then when the person who is abiding by the law doesn't cooperate fully with the police, then the police have another complaint against them. Oh, he's obstructing justice. Anyway, the judge threw it out. And again, of course, the police and the Israeli government immediately appeal, and they want it to be overturned, which happened again, like I said, about half a year ago. A judge also said there's absolutely nothing wrong. It's totally legal. It's within the rights of the Jews to pray on the Temple Mount. They're not disturbing anyone. And the judge made that statement, and then the government appealed, and then the next higher judge overturned it. But each step is an important step because it's, people have to open their eyes. And the police say, well, it's going to encourage violence by the Muslims. So if someone is exercising their right, the police is supposed to protect them. If there's violence against them, then the police are supposed to arrest the people who are being violent and protect the person who's just exercising their rights. The police seem to have this backwards. Again, I make this statement, and I say it with full cognizance of a serious statement. This is a serious statement I'm going to make. In the United States, I grew up in the 1960s, the height of the civil rights movement. And the black population was fighting for its rights as American citizens. And there was violence. Their fight for their rights and their insistence on equality brought a reaction, a very violent reaction. And if the American government had told the police, arrest those people fighting for their rights because it's going to encourage violence, then there'd be, you understand what I'm getting at? Some people say, oh, you can't make that comparison. Well, I think I can, because when we're talking about freedom of worship, that is the most fundamental freedom that a person can have. And that is been systematically taken away from Jews on the Temple Mount, which is, by everyone's account, there's no argument here, the holiest place on earth for Jews. So yes, it's a serious situation, and I personally have been going up to the Temple Mount since I think 1989. I don't go up as often as I'd like to, But thank God many other people are going up now, thousands of people. It used to be just a handful, now it's thousands upon thousands. And it's making a difference. And I'm sorry if certain Muslims don't like that. And I regret that they are going to um, exercise violence in order to discourage Israel from granting the rights of all Jews around the world. Not only Jews, by the way. Jews are sort of in the vanguard of this fight because we're here, we're Israelis, and where we are organized. But of course, we're talking about freedom of religion for all faiths on the Temple Mount, place of the Holy Temple, the place where when King Solomon first dedicated the Holy Temple, we read in the Book of Kings, where he said, people from all over, all nations are going to come from afar to worship here. And of course, the famous prophecy from Isaiah, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations, people of all faiths. Come to this place. It's the most beautiful idea in the world, I think, especially today's world, the one place where people can, as equals, worship the one God. What could be more beautiful? What could be more peaceful than that? And of course, the prophet Haggai said, in this place, referring to the Temple Mount, in this place, I will establish my peace. So, this is what's happening on and about the Temple Mount, and I've been posting articles about the Temple Mount. I encourage you to read them because they're very informative, and there's really histories taking place here. It's happening in slow motion, maybe, and of course, in today's world, people like to see things happen, instantaneously almost. But this is maybe a slow process, but it's happening, and you are witnesses to it, and hopefully you'll be able to enjoy the fruits, benefit from the fruits of this struggle soon. And so it's important to keep informed. I really believe that. That's why I'm sharing this information in the show and also sharing this information on our Facebook page as it happens. Very important stuff. We've talked about Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, which, by the way, I just want to say it's very beautiful. It's going to be on the 43rd day of the Omer this year, but it's pushed off a day, which is the Sephardic configuration is Chesed Malchut. Chesed Malchut. Malchut is kingship. It's sovereignty. That's beautiful. Yom Yerushalayim is usually on. It's usually on. Wait a minute. Yeah, Chesed is usually on. I guess. Is it Malchut Shebiyasod? Sovereignty within foundation. Also a beautiful day to symbolize Jerusalem Day. But here it's Chesed, loving kindness within sovereignty, kingship. And that's Yom Yerushalayim, that's Jerusalem Day, that's what it's all about. Jerusalem Day also, the 28th of ER. Am I right? Maybe it wasn't pushed. I think it's pushed off. The 28th of ER. It's very confusing to me when these days get pushed off. It's also and I admit I'm not the best at figuring this all out. It's also the Yartzeit, the day of the death of the prophet Shmuel. And of course, that's also very beautiful because Samuel was so significant in the establishment of the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. He planned with King David the Holy Temple. They drew up the plans for it. King David began to gather the materials needed for it. And of course, he was told by Hashem that he wouldn't be the one to build it, but his son would. But Shmuel, Samuel, and King David were the prime movers and doers of making the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, a reality. So, and of course, establishing that helped to establish Jerusalem as the eternal capital and of Israel and focal point of the entire world. So, a lot of beauty in this Jerusalem Day, coming up Saturday night, Sunday. Let's go to parashat Bamidbar, the beginning of the book of Numbers. It begins Numbers chapter 1, verse 1, concludes chapter 4, verse 20. And let's read the first few verses in Hebrew, then in English. Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe b'midbar Sinai, bo'el moed, be'echad lachodesh hasheni, b'shana hashenit, letzeitam me'eretz Mitzrayim, lemor. שאו את ראש כל עדת בני ישראל למשפחותם, לבית אבותם, במספר שמות כל זכר לגוגלותם. Hashem spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting on the first of the second month. Right, we're here today, I should say. We're coming to the conclusion of the second month, Iyar. This was at the first of the second month in the second year after their exodus from the land of Egypt, saying, take a census of the entire assembly of the children of Israel according to their families, according to their father's household, by number of the names, every male according to their head count, from 20 years of age and up, everyone who goes out to the legion in Israel. You shall count them according to their legions, you and Aaron. And you shall be one man from each tribe, a man who is leader of his father's household. And then it goes on to name the leader of each of the 12 tribes, and then it goes on to take this census. In the sense of the purpose of the census is to raise an army. Okay, they left Egypt 1 year and 1 month before. They made it to. They crossed the Sea of Reeds. They made it to Mount Sinai. They received Torah. They got the instructions to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which took half a year to construct, and now they are being organized socially and militarily. They're raising an army. Each of the 12 tribes will contribute to that army with one exception, and that being the tribe of Levi, the Levites, because they are the tenders of the tabernacle, the Mishkan. And it's their job to serve. The Kohanim will serve in the tabernacle, and the other Levites, as we're going to read later in the book, this same Bamidbar, the same parashat Bamidbar, have their responsibilities concerning the upkeep of the tabernacle, the disassembly of the tabernacle when Israel is instructed by Hashem to move camp. And they also, each of the Levitical families is assigned what temple vessels they are in charge of, or which could be the curtains and the pillars of the tabernacle itself, or the courtyard around the tabernacle. They need to take them down. They need to carry them. We're going to read in the next parsha of Naso. At the end of that parsha, we read about the gifts that each of the 12 tribal leaders brought to the tabernacle. Long list. They each brought these identical gifts, and among those gifts were wagons. And those wagons were used for transporting the heavy beams and things of the tabernacle. And again, Levites, the Levitical families were responsible for the transportation of every aspect, every part of the tabernacle. We're given detail a little bit later in our parsha. But in the meantime, after the count of the tribal leaders, after the account of the census taken, after the account of the census taken, it's described the array of the encampments around the tabernacle. And on each of the 4 sides of the tabernacle are 3 tribes. And each of these, one of the 3 tribes is the leader of that branch of the army. There's one leader of the 3 in each of the 4 sides: east, west, north, and south. And each tribe has its own flag. It's very fascinating. All of a sudden, the first time it's discussed in the Torah at all is this idea of a flag. And again, chapter 2 in Numbers, Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, the children of Israel shall encamp, each man by his banner, according to the insignias of their father's household. So each banner, each flag is going to have an insignia, some kind of design that, a coat of arms that designates their tribal association. And we're not told what that is. Now, traditionally, we know that we learn from the blessings of Yaakov, and way back at the conclusion of the book of Genesis, when he blessed his sons and he gave them all. One is he compares to a snake, one he compares to a deer, and they became the symbols of the different tribes, and those were the symbols on their banners, according to tradition. Each man by his banner, according to the insignias of their father's household, at a distance surrounding the tent of meeting shall they encamp. Those who encamp to the front at the east shall be the banner of the camp of Judah, according to their legions, and the leader of the children of Judah is Nachshon, son of Aminadav, etc., etc., and then it goes around the 12 tribes. So we have this beautiful arrangement of the 12 tribes surrounding the tabernacle, protecting the tabernacle, right? The army is at the edge, and the center, the beating heart of the encampment, of the Israelite encampment, is the tabernacle. And in an inner circulation of the tabernacle are the tribe of Levi. As I said earlier, those who attend to the tabernacle, they're the ones who are encamped between the tabernacle and the other tribes. And they surround the tabernacle by three sides. The fourth side is the tent of meeting and where Moshe dwells. So we have this beautiful configuration of the 12 tribes, each one distinct from the other, and it's made very significant. Each one has its own banner. And of course, these banners are going to be used in warfare and in preparing for warfare. Obviously, you have a banner, it's high up and people can see it from afar. But each tribe retains its distinction, its uniqueness, but each tribe is part of this tribal unit of 12, which are going to be advancing in the desert in this arrangement, always with the tabernacle in the center, at the heart. A, because it is the beating heart of the nation of Israel to this very day, and B, because it needs to be protected. And of course, as I said earlier, the Levites are right next to the tabernacle, and there they can quickly disassemble and assemble it when Israel embarks and when Israel comes to rest at an encampment, according to God's instructions, which we'll be learning a little bit more about later in the book of Numbers. So the book of Numbers is, of course, this beautiful account of Israel's travels in the desert. And I say beautiful, even though not every story is a positive story. Not every story sheds positive light on the Israelites, to tell you the truth. But it's the way it was. It's what happened. And they made it. And the proof of that is that we're here today. All our ups and downs. But we're here today. And we're here today thanks to this amazing generation which left Egypt, received Torah, and made it to the promised land, where their children entered into the promised land. So, thank you, generation of the desert, also known as the generation of knowledge. Generation of knowledge because they lived in a super high fashion, spiritual fashion. I mean, they received Torah at Sinai. They heard God's voice. They saw the mountain flaming and smoke and thunder, etc., etc. They ate manna from God's table every morning. They lived on this super high level. And of course, that may be the reason why they stumbled when it came to actually getting ready to enter into the land of Israel. Perhaps, we'll talk about this much more when we read Parashat Shlach, which is the parashat in a few weeks, which deals with the spies, they weren't ready maybe for a more physical, material lifestyle. Still with the tabernacle at their center, and still, of course, based on the Torah, of course. But they're going to have to start earning their own bread, working for their own bread. Once they enter into the land of Israel, the manna stops falling, and they have to become more independent. They have to grow up. And perhaps they weren't quite ready for that, and maybe that's why they stumbled. But like I said, we'll talk about that much more in the future. That is in a few weeks from now. And anyway, here we are in the wilderness. And when we read about the assignments given to there are three different families of the tribe of Levi. There were the family of Gershon, the family of Kahat, and the family of Merari. And each one had their own assignments. We read in Numbers 3, I guess we can begin with verse 21. Each had their own assignments of what their responsibilities were in transporting the tabernacle. And I want to mention one thing fascinates me. Verse 27, chapter 3, 27, Kohat, one of the three families of Levites, of Levi. Kohat had the family of the Amramites. That's the family of Moshe. Right? Amram was Moshe's father, Moshe and Aaron's father, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam's father, the family of the Israelites. Is that how we say it? I'm looking at okay. The family of the Hebronites and the family of the Uzzielites. Okay. These were the Kohatite families. The number of every male from 1 month, blah, 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 blah. But then it goes on. The families of the children of Kohat would encamp on the side of the tabernacle to the south. The leader of the father's house of the Kohatite families was Elitzaphan, the son of Uzziel. Their charge was the ark, the table, the menorah, the altars, and the sacred utensils, with they would minister the partition and its accessories. And it's mentioned just a little bit later that when they would transport these things, they would cover them with the beautiful fabrics that were part of the Mishkan itself, the tabernacle, including the tachash skins, tachash being that animal that we not really certain of what it was, and of course the tachelet, the beautiful blue fabric, blue dyed fabric, and the aron, the ark, was mentioned. It's also covered with these beautiful blue tachelet, kulo tachelet. It's all blue. I'm mentioning that because when we talk in a few weeks about Korach, the rebel, who was from the family of Kohat, he's a cousin of Moshe, and he wanted to take over the kuhuna, the priesthood. And there's a whole midrash with him and a beged, a garment that's completely techelet, completely blue. We'll talk about that, but I always find this very significant that he was one of the guys who carried the ark. He had the most amazing job in the world, carrying the ark, which they would cover with a fabric completely blue, which symbolized kingship and royalty and godliness. He would carry that. It wasn't enough for him. Again, I'm giving another spoiler alert here, but there's so much to talk about. We just finished up the book of Leviticus, which really focused on the inner workings of the tabernacle and things like holiness and things like purity, ritual purity. And now we're taking a big turn, and we're talking about adventures, stories, happenings that happened to Israel throughout their 40-year sojourn in the wilderness. Here is the music. Thank you so much for being with me. And remember, this coming, let's say Shabbat, Saturday night, Sunday, Jerusalem Day, celebrate it with us wherever you are. Thanks for being with me. Temple Talk.